G'day everyone, welcome to another episode of the Purple Coloured Glasses. In this episode I'll be going through my tips for round 19 and how Freo will go up against the Tigers. Bit of a later episode. I got back from Vegas last night and I was pretty cooked, so I thought I would do this episode Friday morning before the games. So let's get into it. So Freo against the Tigers. It's a Tigers home game, so you think it would be at the MCG. I think there's a contract or something where they've got to play a couple of games at Marvel. Tigers don't like playing at Marvel. I think they've won 3 out of their last 12. And since Damien Hardwick last year or the year before said we don't like going to Marvel Stadium, they've lost 4 in a row there. So I'm sure he'd probably want that back. Freo's record's been fairly decent at Marvel, 3 out of 4. And the game we dropped against Carlton was after the bye, and we looked a bit flat. I think the boys will have a bit of a fire in their belly after the loss against Sydney last week and really want to improve on their previous performance and get back on the winners list. Tigers lost to North Melbourne, and before that, Gold Coast giving up a 40-point lead. So I wonder if there's a bit of in between the ears emotional stuff for them where they've really been so close the last 2 weeks. They should have won both games, and are they going to come out firing again, or are they're cooked mentally? It's hard to tell. In terms for Richmond, they're in, so they bring Soldo in and they leave out Arts and Gibcus. Lynch and Martin are not coming back for this game, which is good for Freo. Alex Pearce comes in and Liam Henry, and out is Ethan Hughes, who's the Medi sub, Roy Lobb and Collier. So Lobb hasn't really got over that shoulder injury where he got tackled by one of the McCartan brothers, I think it was last week. And he soldiered on, but Longmuir was even asked in the presser should have he played on the rest of the game, and he said he had full motion, well not full motion, but he was comfortable to keep playing it out, and they did think about subbing him, but it did have a bit of an impact in our sort of structure. He wasn't able to make as many contests, and our tall marking game was really off last week. Darcy only stuck 1 mark, Fife no marks, Lobb couldn't really clunk too many. So it'd be good with Alex Pearce coming back in and moving Griffin Logue, I imagine, up to the forward line. So I think our tall structure will still be very similar. And we'll just expect, I think we should be playing Fife up around that half forward line and just trust Brayshaw, Brody, Mundy and Sarong to get it done in this one. Jordan Clark's playing his 50th game. He got tagged last week, which is... He's only playing his 50th game, playing off half-back. You normally think you're getting the cheapies and being quite damaging with it. But I think similar to teams like St Kilda with Sinclair, if you're a damaging half-back, and like Daniel Rich at Brisbane as well, teams can put work on you, and I think Sydney did that quite well. I'm not sure Richmond will do the same thing. I think they'll probably just want to go head-to-head against us. So I think Jordan Clark will be a bit freer this week. In terms of where I think some of the key matchups are, so in the ruck it'll be really interesting because we'll have Darcy up against Soldo and Nankervis, and with Lob out there'll be no sort of like chop out in the ruck. So who's going to be that ruck chop out for Freo? Brendan Cox has done it before, but he's playing down back, and so it can be a bit harder for a backman to jump in the ruck. Maybe they throw Griffin Logan for a couple of contests, or Matt Taverner. Yeah, it's a bit of a weird one in that space. Lloyd Meek was named as an emergency, but from my understanding, he didn't travel over on the plane. I think that was only Croden and Collier who were named as emergencies that actually got on the plane. So pretty sure we'll only be going in with one established ruck, and I think that's the right choice at Marvel. And as good as Lloyd Meek is as a backup, I don't think we've looked that good when we've played both rucks. We just look a bit slower around the ground. So I think that'll be key. In terms of the damaging players for Richmond, really over this year, it's been Daniel Rioli off half-back. So whether we put someone like Freddie on him or a Liam Henry. So Liam Henry's been named on the team at a half-forward flank. His best position's probably on the wing. So whether there's going to be some rotation through the wing position or he's actually going to try play an attacking role on Daniel Liam Henry's not really a negative lockdown player. It's more of a Banfield or a Freddie type of position, I think, and try to get them going the other way. And the other one's Shy Bolton. And I think that's just someone we just need to lock down on. And if he's coming off that half forward flank, can be damaging. Walsh was doing that really well against us when we played Carlton, like lining up at half forward and rolling up into the centre and creating an extra. And he's very explosive, getting away from the contest and getting back into the forward 50. So that's where I could see they could do a bit of damage to us. In terms of the rest of their like mids, we really have our midfield's been more up and about and has a bit more pace and really should get them going the other way. They don't have that explosiveness that some other midfields have against us. They're not a team historically who've won lots of clearances. And that's where our midfielder have been beaten a few times this year, is centre bounces and clearances. And when we've been able to even up the contest, that's normally all we need, because we've got good intercept markers and skills to transition the ball. So we're playing a team that's not as dominant in that space, so I think that's where we'll sort of make the difference. We just need to sort of go 50-50 or 60-40 in those clearance centre bounce situations, and get the ball forward, lock it in our forward half. And that's where we haven't been as good recently, is the ball is just sort of rebounding back out, or we can't get it in our 50 in the first place. So need some big games from Freddie and Schultz and Walters and Henry and Banfield and these guys just to lock the ball in. And I think that's where Griffin Logue will be great as well up forward, because he provides a really strong pressure at the ground level as well. So we're going for the Dockers in this one. I think it'll be about 3 to 4 goals. Excuse me. I think it'll be close for periods of the game. And then that sort of third, fourth quarter burst we've been good at away from home this year. Just put a bit of a gap on and see it out from there. So moving on to the Saturday games. So I've got North up against Hawthorn as the first one. The Tasmania Derby. Or Derby. North are a pretty good chance in this one, I think. Hawks haven't exactly been convincing, and they haven't been great against bottom 4 sides over the last couple of years. I think their record's like 1-10 or something like that. So North would be looking at this going, this is an opportunity for us. Hawks, though, I'll be tipping in this game. It's more just the emotional rebound for me. So I think the last 2 weeks, really, North had Collingwood on toast and really should have beaten them. Coach gets sacked. The come out play for the coach factor. The game after that is normally a bit of an emotional slump. So I'll be tipping the Hawks in this one. Jack Gunston's back in for the Hawks. Doesn't look like any changes for North Melbourne. Giath's out or CJ's out for Hawks, and Mitchell Lewis is playing his 50th game, and Hugh Greenwood playing his 100th for North. So yeah, we go on the Hawks in that one. Not a game where a lot's riding on it. If North do win, though, they'll move out of the bottom position. And they'll probably be looking at their fixture list sort of coming up and going, this would be one we can win. Put some pressure on West Coast to complete the treble of wooden spoons. So then the next game, we've got Sydney up against Adelaide. I was asked in a comment on my last video about, worried about Sydney. So Sydney played very well against us. They sort of beat us the way I thought they could, which is not necessarily dominating around the contest, but when they've got the ball in hand, just cutting us up with their foot skills. They just took those short options. And against a team like Adelaide, at home, they should handle them quite comfortably. Their form at the SCG hasn't been amazing, but Adelaide have been one of the worst teams with the ball in hand. They just turn it over. So Sydney are already really good with the ball in hand, and you don't want to be giving them extra looks. So I think Sydney will win this quite comfortably. I do think Sydney will slip up on the way home at some stage, but I don't think it'll be against a team like Adelaide. It'll be probably one of those. It'll be a team around that bracket, though, I think, just playing away. So I don't think it'll be this game. So Sydney quite comfortably, I think. Probably 5-6 goals, maybe more. Then a really interesting game. So back at the Adelaide Oval, Port Adelaide against Geelong. I think Port are in for a real sniff here. They dominated statistically, you'd say, against Melbourne, but just seemed to let Pickett run around by himself and kick 6 goals. If they do that to someone like Stengel this week, they'll get cut up again. I'll be tipping Geelong in this game. They're just going along really well. Really professional performance week after week. They handled Carlton really well. I sort of got burnt tipping some upsets last week, so I'll be going for the steady choice here in Geelong. Port have the weapons to beat them at home, but and I think it'll be close. I think it'll only be a couple of goals, but I think Geelong will get the job done in this one. I think the tall forward matchups might be a bit challenging for Port Adelaide, and also that small forward matchup. I don't think they have a good small lockdown defender for someone like a Stengel who get off the chain a bit, I think. And then another game with... So these next 3 games actually have some big ramifications for the top 4. So, could see Port winning that one, but I'll be going for Geelong. And then another game is Brisbane against Gold Coast, where I think Gold Coast are a chance in this, but I'll be going Brisbane. It's at the Gabba. The record of the Gabba has been immense. Yes, they dropped a game against the Bombers a few weeks back, but there was lots of COVID impacts with 9 outs, so can't really take much away from that. It's pretty much a fortress there at Brisbane. Teams don't really go to the Gabba and win these days. Why are Gold Coast a chance? I think they're a chance partly because it's a derby match. I think there's a bit about Gold Coast where they're probably a bit sick of getting bullied. Makes me think a bit about the old sort of Freo West Coast rivalry, where West Coast just beat us consistently every single time. Has a bit of that demo derby maybe build up to it. I don't think it'll be as physical as that based on what the rules are these days, but I think Gold Coast, they go down, but they put up a pretty good fight against Brisbane. A lot of physicality in this game, and who knows? I think for Gold Coast, for them, they've got nothing to lose. You may as well put your best foot forward. You upset your rival. It could impact their top 4 chances. So Brisbane could be a bit cagey and nervous as well. You put them under pressure, who knows what might happen. So there's a bit riding on this game for both teams, but I'll be tipping Brisbane in this one. Western Bulldogs against Melbourne. I don't understand why people think this game will be close. Just looking at some of the odds here, but in terms of the tipping percentage, 85% have tipped Melbourne, which is the way I'll be tipping. Melbourne have been very patchy. And they are definitely gettable at the moment. But I don't think the Dogs have the weapons to do it. Bontempelli was very good last week, getting back into the hole. But I thought the Saints were very slow with their ball movement, letting the Bont and a few other the Bulldogs midfielders flood back. The Bulldogs are really missing like a key defender. Their forward line, I think it will be manageable now that they've got Bruce back. Norton should come back from the health and safety protocols, I'm pretty sure. Let me just check the lineups for this one. So Aaron Norton does come back in for them, and Melbourne get back Oliver and Petty. So just finish up on the Bulldogs. So I think their forward line is okay. They've almost got too many mids though. Like I've always thought their team is like primarily midfield, with some key players at like either end of the ground. And down back is where they're missing that real monster defender. Where it probably doesn't matter so much against Melbourne is Ben Brown hasn't really been dominating. Melbourne haven't had a key forward like absolutely taking hold of games. Fritsch has looked a bit patchy, and he's a smaller matchup anyway. So someone like Keith could go onto him. Jackson hasn't been as explosive as he was in that final series last year. Max Gawn still sort of coming back from his injuries and stuff. But Petrarca has been playing quite well in the last month or so. I thought he'd be nowhere near sort of the All-Australian teams. Sort of in the midpoint. He hadn't really been as dominant as he has been. But in the last month or 6 weeks, he's really put together some strong performances. Clayton Oliver comes back from his thumb injury. So he's only out for a week in that. I don't know how he'll sort of play with that injury. Like, does he play with a splint or a bandage around it or something like that? I think that won't really impact him. He's one of those guys that's just really tough and gets on with it. Petty comes in for them, so from their tall back structure, I think they're in a reasonable position. They've still got May and Lever in the team, and I think they'll handle Bruce and Norton all right. Norton is one of those guys physically, I think, who can sort of go toe-to-toe with Stephen May, as long as he's not letting him float off too much, so he needs to show him a bit more respect. But yeah, I'll be going for the D's in this one. The Bulldogs can win. I think if their midfield really get on top of Oliver and Petrarca, but I don't think they've just been too patchy this year, the doggies. So I'll be going for the D's in this one. Then we've got Carlton up against GWS. It's really one where historically Carlton would slip up, but I think they'll win this quite comfortably. GWS had a good opportunity to beat Brisbane last week, sort of guys coming back from COVID and a bit of disruption in the Brisbane camp, but they just look like guys that have checked out for the year. They're already on their holidays. There was talk about Mark McVeigh saying he's going to train the boys into the ground and stuff. So if he does that, I reckon they'll be even flatter. I don't reckon they're going to come out and give a response. They're probably going to be a bit cooked physically. And I think Carlton will actually feast on GWS a bit in this game. They're pretty good value at Marvel Stadium. So I'll be going minimum 4-goal win. Might even be a bit more. Then the MCG, we have Essendon against Collingwood. And it almost hurts me to say this, but I'm tipping the Bombers in this one. Their form over the last month has been really good. They lost that game against West Coast, which they really shouldn't have. The Pies have just been getting it done. And what drama would it be if Jack Ginnivan actually legitimately got hit high in front of goal after the siren and doesn't get an opportunity to have a free kick to win another close game. But I don't think it'll be close, mate. I actually think Bombers will win by a couple of goals here. They just look like they're playing on top of the ground at the moment. You watch them run around; they look very free, and I do think it speaks a bit to Essendon's emotional state where there's nothing at stake for them now, so they can just play with freedom. Where Collingwood look like they've been going through that grind, and teams chipping away at them. They're still doing enough to win games, and credit to them. It's much better to have won those games than to have lost them by small margins and then have to come up against a fairly informed team like Essendon. So they got a bit of a buffer if they do drop it. But yeah, I'll be going for the Bombers in this one just based on... I think they're up and about at the moment. And the last game, West Coast against St Kilda. This one is tricky to tip. Saints have been kind of garbage since the bye. They've only won 1 out of their last 5 games, I think it is now. Bulldogs smashed them. Yep, they kicked some junk time goals, I think, when Doggies took the foot off the accelerator. Freo smacked them. They beat Carlton. They got touched up by Sydney as well in there. So they're not exactly in great form to be going over to Perth and just get an easy win against West Coast. West Coast have been a lot more competitive than they have been. But they're still letting in fairly big scores. They just have quarters where they just don't rock up and teams pile the goals on. I'll be tipping St Kilda, but I won't be surprised if West Coast win. They're looking a lot better, particularly at home this year. They pushed Hawthorn till the end of the game last week. They're not throwing in the towel the way they sort of seem like they were doing the early parts of the year. But yeah, I'll be going Saints. Not with a great deal of conviction in this one. And so those are my tips for the week. Let me know what your thoughts are. So my only upset I'm actually tipping this week by the looks is the Bombers against... the Bombers against Collingwood. The Richmond Freo game looks like it's an even type of game. But based on what people are tipping, it's 2/3 tipping Freo. So, those are my tips. Let me know what you think. Leave me a like. Leave me a comment, and I'll see you all next week for my review of the round. See you, everyone. Bye.